I'm Sean. I'm your host
Hey.
today. Welcome to the Cold Feet Podcast. One of the things I do is I work a lot with military and tactical. I help pre-Army soldiers. I work one-on-one with them before they draft. I also work with a pre-Army academy. And along my journeys, I work with in the military, post-military. I'm just a military dude. And I'm joined today by the one and only, you can introduce yourself.
My name is Yaira. I'm 20 years old. I'm currently serving in the Caloric battalion. I was a combat soldier for about a year and a half, and I'm now a combat fitness instructor.
Wow. Okay. So can you walk us through the day of what a combat fitness instructor is in the military?
Yeah, for sure. So my path to getting here was a little bit different because I didn't actually do the course that the Army provides for people to become fitness instructors. I'm a personal trainer. I'm certified through two different organizations, one specific to Canada, one internationally recognized. And the opportunity to do this job was presented to me by the commander of the whole battalion after I was injured and had to drop from combat. So what I do day to day throughout the week is create and then train the officers through different workouts, whether that be just the soldiers themselves, the officers, the commander of the battalion.
One of the things that you went through in the Army was leaving your combat position to going to a fitness instructor role. Now, that's something surprising. People don't know this. I did that as well. I was in Yalom, which is the elite combat engineering unit. In my second year of service, I had severe stress fractures. So I was given an option what to do, and same concept. I came from a background of strength and conditioning. I came from a background of fitness. So I decided to become one of the combat fitness instructors of the unit. I began training them. I also didn't do a course. I was later sent to an abridged version of the combat fitness course. There's two courses for those who are listening. There's a full 3-month course for people who draft to be a fitness instructor. And there is a 5-week course for combat soldiers who want to gain, extra strength and conditioning knowledge and tactical athletic development. So I was sent to that abridged version, and that essentially launched my career. So I can definitely resonate with you, and I can definitely relate to you because my journey was very similar to yours. And what I really want to delve into is you being a lone soldier. You were very highly motivated. Your dream was to be a combat soldier in the IDF. And how was it to deal with that rejection or overcoming that barrier of saying, okay, I'm no longer a combat soldier. I'm now an instructor instead?
Yeah, so like you, I grew up an athlete. And so I put my body through the ringer. And when I drafted, there were some kind of underlying things that resurfaced to haunt me. So I have chronic ankle instability. One of the things that happened is that I sprained my ankle really badly at the start of basic training, but I chose to ignore it. I put a plastic ankle brace inside my boot and wore that the entirety of basic and advanced training, which is something I highly do not recommend. It only hurts you in the long run, because one of the things that happens when you have ligament damage in an ankle is the muscles around the ligament have to take the spot of the ligament and work, as I'm sure you already know. And with that brace, the muscles weren't working. It was relying completely on the brace, and not only did it hurt, it also damaged the tissue further. But I finished advanced training, and then at the start of my time on CAV, I think in English is close like your first deployment. The corona situation here in Israel, and so they were very, very hesitant to send me to get an x-ray. In the end, I only got an ultrasound. And one of the things I learned about a year later, visiting my family, was that I'd actually fractured my ankle and I didn't know it. I had what's called an avulsion fracture, which is when you sprain your ankle so badly that the ligament tears off a piece of the bone. I had to make a decision really regarding, longevity. So could I push through and continue to wear a brace and finish as a combat soldier? Yes. Would that harm me in the long run? 110%. And I had to really weigh my options of what do I want, like, in the length of my time, how important fitness is to me, how important my training is to me, how would I be able to manage if that was completely taken away because of one decision I made, really considering my ego and only my ego. Like you said, it was my dream. But in the end, for the sake of my health in the long term, I knew what I needed to do because I wasn't able to do my job the way I needed to without result. So I had a bunch of conversations with my officers, with the doctor, and then with the commander of the whole battalion. And he was the one who brought forth the idea of putting me in a position where I would be a combat fitness instructor. And like you, I didn't do the course, but because I'm so close to the end of my service, there's no point in sending me to the shortened version, because in order to do so, you need to have a certain amount of time left in your service. And I finished in about 2 months' time. So
wow.
Yeah.
So what I hear is a very, very sound.
That was the process.
Yeah. What I hear is a very, very sound, logical decision that you made, and you chose the best path for you despite it being a little bit emotionally overwhelming. Can we delve a little bit into the emotions of it? Because you and me are not the only lone soldiers who drafted with dreams and aspirations and fell from combat. So you said, like, I made a plan, I'm good, I'm happy now, but like, how was it to deal with it emotionally and cope with this? I don't want to call it a failure, because it's not a failure. It's a win for you, it's a win for me. But how was that?
Yeah. So what I'll say is, it wasn't the first time that I felt like my ankles got in the way of me doing something. It had happened to me quite a few times during my athletic career when I was competing as a fighter. And I, unfortunately, many a time felt like I'd had a dream taken away from me because I had been going strong, injured my ankle, and then been forced to take time off. So it wasn't a new feeling. But with that, there was always another competition to train for. There's not another Army experience to train for, right? So I still, feel a pain when I see, my old teammates in their gear going out for a mission of sorts. But I really kind of had to sit with it and weigh all my options and understand that I'm in this for the long run, for the long game. I have aspirations. I have other things that I want to do. And for me, my body allows me to accomplish things physically that bring me a lot of joy. And I knew that if I decided to push through with this, that I ran the risk of taking those options away completely for the years to come, and that this 2-3 year period wasn't worth paying for it for the next 50 years. I was told by a doctor at one point that if I continued doing what I was doing, I wouldn't be able to walk by the time I was 30, and that kind of sealed the deal for me.
Wow. I mean,
So
I really
tough,
yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. That was it. It was tough, but it's worth it. It's worthwhile.
Yeah, I really, really admire your persistence, your ability to persevere through this whole process. I know it's not easy. As someone who met you before you drafted and, was your instructor in Civa Mikey and worked with you, it's not an easy decision to do what you did and take it, be easy. Take it at a very whatever, this is where my role is now. For all those listening, either who are planning on drafting, are currently in the military, or even just people listening from abroad and are curious about how the IDF works, we have to understand that even though the military is in theory the epitome of strength and power and conditioning, it's not. It's really not. And I have made several posts and articles on this and even podcasts about how walking with 100, 80 to 100% of your body weight is not a healthy thing. Sleeping not enough is not a healthy thing. Eating very, very low nutrient food in the field for months on end is not a healthy thing. So while we do want our tactical, we do want our military to perform at the very best, they're not in an environment which allows them to perform at their very best. And this makes it a very, very difficult dilemma for guys like me who work in the civilian world of tactical and you who works in the military world of tactical. What do you do? Like, all you want to do is a strenuous, intense workout so they can get better. But wait, they didn't sleep last night. In fact, they didn't sleep for 2.5 days because they were on a mission.
No recovery.
Yeah. Go ahead. What do you say?
Yeah, you're 100% right. Like, we know that one of the founding principles of improvement is that recovery period, right? Without proper recovery, there's no improvement, there's no progress, and there's zero room for recovery here. So it's like trying to find that balance between how can I, challenge them and create this periodization and this improvement when they're not sleeping, they're barely eating, and their rest periods, they're taxing themselves further. It's it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest dilemmas I faced when I was up north. So I was stationed and working with the Lochamim near the Syrian and Lebanon border, and I'd have my whole, fancy workout. We did come back from a mission after 2 days or 3 days of no sleep, barely eating good food, and I'd be like, "All right, guys, let's go with sprint," and they're like, "Yeah, about that." So one of the things I did is I did what we call micro periodization. If they had, let's say, 3 weeks of training where they were on base and they had better conditions and they were eating better and they were sleeping better, that's when I would load as much as possible. We do, 2 sessions a day, intense training. And at times when they were like out in the field with not good food, so that would be more maintenance. So if I can get like one good strength session in that week, I'm happy. And, we just try to do our best in the situation. The factor is, though, the aspect is the military is not the place to improve tremendously in your strength or your conditioning or your mobility just because of the conditions. So for girls and guys like you who come to that choice of the military is 2 to 3 years, I can finish my service with pride, impacting everyone around me as a fitness instructor. Or I can finish my service with my ligaments torn from my body. Yay, I finished the army as a combat soldier, but what did I do for the rest of my life? Like I have a whole, Israeli recruits are anywhere between 18 to 23. And if you're leaving the army with scarred for life because your knee, your ankle, because you push yourself too much, that's not a healthy choice. And it's better to, sacrifice the combat glory that we have here in Israel for your long-term health. And that's why I'm so supportive of, what you did. Now, delving into the military not being a healthy place, can you give us listeners just tips like how do I maintain my strength in the army, how to work out in the army, how to eat in the army? Now the disclaimer is it's not ideal, meaning it sounds silly that we're even having this discussion. Oh, because of course the army, they give you 5 servings of protein a day. No, they don't. Of course they give you vegetables, only sometimes. So like on you, just give us your secrets.
Yeah, nutrition in the army is a huge issue in my opinion because the variety is huge. You can go to 3 different bases and feel like you're in 3 different worlds. And I think a lot of people, especially if you're missing meals because you have a siur or a guard shift or you have some kind of mission going on, which means you don't eat. You only get takeout food that somebody's brought you where they're not allowed to put vegetables in it because they can only have hot foods in it, which means you only are getting carbs and maybe a small serving of protein.
Carbs and carbs.
Your sleep schedule. Yeah, it's carbs and oil and a little bit of protein. That's what you get in the army. Vegetables in the army is cucumbers and tomatoes. In my opinion, cucumbers is just green water, right? Like I don't consider cucumber a vegetable. I consider it a hydration tool. And what do they have? They have the shekem. What's in the shekem? Little kiosk. Junk. And I'm a big fan of moderation. I think depriving yourself only leads to bad patterns and behaviors around food, but nutrition is so critical, especially when they're already not getting enough sleep and they're taxing their bodies. So what I like to give people is a kind of a basis of how to structure their meals using their hand. Depending on whether it's a guy or a girl, using the hand to select portion sizes of things, of protein, of healthy fats, of carbs, of salads, which is the vegetable option that you have. Keep in mind in the army, because it's kosher, dinner is always dairy. So dinner is practically the same as breakfast. What does that mean? You have eggs, usually either hard-boiled or in omelet form. You have different types of yogurts and pudding options, most of which are chock full of sugars. You have maybe some bananas or apples. You have some salads. And then you'll have like rice or couscous or potatoes or all of the above. And one thing you see a lot in the army is you see that guys drop weight and girls gain weight. Because guys are only now allowed to eat at specific times when most of them are used to eating kind of whenever they want. And girls, either they come from a background where they, pay more attention to what they're eating and now suddenly it's not up to them, or just the overall stress and the hormone changes affect them and affect their cravings and affect their patterns and the way they're eating. It's a system that's not built to help them succeed. And so they don't. So the education component is really, really important. Talking to them about what's in their food. Is there really a difference between potatoes and rice? Well, maybe there is. Is there a difference between the different meat options that are available? Can you befriend kitchen staff in order to get them to give you more protein? That's the secret here, is befriend people in the kitchen. That's the number one tip I can give you.
100%.
Because protein, those amino acids are the building blocks, right? And I think a lot of people look at the yogurts that are full of sugars and chemicals. And if you check the preservation date, some of those things are lasting you 2, 3, 4 months in the fridge. And for me, that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
And they're thinking that's the same as an omelet or the hard-boiled eggs. It's not. Nutritionally, the profile it's not the same. The micronutrients are so critical. Getting things that are, minimally processed, because processed food, everything's processed. Everything's been through multiple people's hands and down a chain in order to get to you. So saying unprocessed foods doesn't really apply here, but finding things that are less processed, sticking to foods that are full of vitamins and nutrients and minerals, making sure you're getting enough of the right things, but also allowing yourself to have, a treat here and there. Keep yourself sane. Don't deprive yourself. For the guys who feel like they're dropping weight too quickly, especially for guys who are in special forces units, when they're doing so much cardio and very little strength training, which I know must grate your nerves as much as it grates mine. They're the ones who really need to kind of push as many calories into the bodies as possible. I know guys who, what they would do is just drink tahina, like drink the containers of tahina and just, empty calories into their bodies, because they're burning thousands of calories a day. When you do a nesiga, when you're walking kilometers and kilometers and kilometers, all that weight, and then, getting woken up in the middle of the night to do more exercises, especially in the training periods of those special forces units, they're just burning through calories, and then they're not sleeping, so their bodies aren't repairing. And that nutrition component is so key and so often overlooked.
Yeah, wow, you really said a lot. So just to summarize some of your key points to make it easier for people out there listening, the Army is not an ideal place. You're not sleeping well. The second you're not optimizing recovery, nutrition becomes even more important, because if we look at the three foundations of optimizing your body's performance, so we got performance, like all the workouts you do, we got your sleep, and then we get hydration and nutrition. So if one of those pillars aren't in place, let's say sleep, you can't hypercompensate with another pillar, but you could eat really well and it could make up a little bit for the sleep. Sleep's still important though. So befriend the cooks. I would always be like, yo, you want the gym key? Because I had access in the base. I'll give you the gym key late at night. You give me extra protein. So we had a whole good deal working out. Optimizing protein to get into like real logistics. At least in my unit in the Army, breakfast and dinner, as you said, was dairy and eggs. So you can have unlimited hard-boiled eggs. So I would just take like 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 100 egg whites.
Yeah. They'll look at you funny, but do it.
I thought I was literally, I don't want to
insane, yeah?
It's insane. But I'd be like, hey, I'm the one who's not getting injured. Thank God. I'm the one who's healthy. I'm the one who's strong. I'm the one who's keeping up with the 10K runs and squatting 130 kilo. And, you're not. So let me eat my 10 egg whites.
I'm doing something right.
Yeah, and my 2 containers of, gvina levana, the quark, the white cheese, and I'm going to do my thing. Optimize egg whites. Whenever you have vegetables, cram them in. Whenever you go to the field, when I was a combat fitness instructor, I would go to the logistical guy, the rasap, and I'd be like, give me 40 cans of tuna. He'd be like, not going to happen. I said, give me 40 cans of tuna. He's like, not going to happen. So I go to like the commander. I'd be like, yo, like the commander of the school, like of the training. I'd be like, yo, I need tuna for my guys in the shetach in the field. He'd be like, no problem. Here's the key to the kitchen. Like, if you're a fitness instructor or you're a soldier, don't be afraid to ask. Because if they're giving you bread and jam, it does tie into what you said about like guzzling calories. And I totally agree with that for combat soldiers. But it's not just guzzling calories. There's also a concept of quality. So if we can get quality, if I can get fruits instead
guzzling the right calories, yeah.
Fruits instead of bread and jam, if I can get tuna, if I can get protein shakes, and our unit, the whole trina thing. So the soldiers I worked with, they had 2 mandatory things. They had protein powder. They had to have a shake or 2 a night. Obviously, people who struggle to buy their own, we'd help them out. And they every break, like twice a day, they had to have like a whole grain We brought whole wheat bread to the Shetach. I know it sounds crazy. It's an elite unit. We have a little bit of extra, resources.
A little extra care.
Either with trina or with natural peanut butter. Natural peanut butter is fairly high in protein and nutrients as well. For those who don't like trina, 2 sandwich snacks a day, mandatory, plus a protein shake in the night to ensure they're A, getting more protein, and B, getting more calories. I wanted to address, so cram in your egg whites, cram in your whenever their option is, and also cram in your veggies. Regarding calories, so this is the one time in life that me and Yaira are going to say, just eat as much as you freaking can. This applies mostly to men and women to an extent, in special forces and regular combat units to an extent. Now, with the disclaimer is you have to know your body. So if you're someone 100%. Who suffers with eating disorder or mental health or, something that can impact the way you
relate towards food or relate towards yourself after eating.
Don't guzzle calories. Just eat till you're satisfied, till you're full, till you're emotionally satisfied with food. Every now and then, as Yaira said, have a cinnamon bun, have the treat. Don't worry too hard about it. And if someone comments to you, you're a fitness instructor, why are you eating a cinnamon bun? Smack them in the face really hard. Okay? Good. Tip from me. Have you ever dealt with that?
Then offer them a cinnamon bun and tell them why it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a nice way to do it. I guess
all the time. All the time. I have my weekly routine.
Exactly.
Consuming an entire box of tofifi, and the people look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, listen, it has to fuel my 17-kilometer run tomorrow somehow.
Exactly. I don't like looking at food just as fuel, because food is so much more than fuel. It's emotional. You have birthdays with food. You have barbecues with food. You have meetups with food. And also in the Army, at least the way I saw it in the Army, was it's such a regimented schedule and structure where you're running and you're crawling and you're being tortured essentially.
Yeah.
Food time is not just fuel time. It's downtime. So that 20 to 30 minutes you have breakfast and lunch and dinner is an emotional break from your day. So for those who are with eating disorders and those who are suffering with mental health, that time in your food is also an emotional time. And a lot of times it can lead to, I wouldn't say overeating, because overeating may not be a bad thing in this case, but it can lead to an unhealthy relationship with food. But we're going to get to mental health in a second. Back to guzzling calories. If you're a guy or girl, you are so physically active. I did the math with my soldiers. I tracked them. I MyFitnessPal, what they're eating. They're every day hitting around 4,000 calories less than they needed.
Yeah.
4,000 calories is I have, when I was working as a combat fitness instructor, I was with them the entire day. So they did a hike, I was with them. They ran, I was with them. They walked, I was with them. Their commanders were in the field in the shooting range. Also being a combat soldier myself, I know how to shoot. I've helped them with that as well. I was with them. 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day in a regular elite unit soldier. An average soldier is getting in 2,000 to 3,000 calories. That's less than half. And then they wonder why we're all getting stress fractures, why we're all getting shin splints, why we're all undernourished and breaking our bones and ligaments every day, because we don't have, sorry, I can't curse on camera. We don't have food. We don't have nutrients. We don't have fuel. So
yeah.
What's your, that's how I did it. I would love to hear your thoughts on that. How can we as soldiers, whether we're commanders or logistical officers or combat fit instructors, what can we do to take action to help our soldiers get more food, get more fuel, get more sleep, get more recovery?
You're absolutely right. For me, it was about finding connections in the right places. Like you said, making sure that I had a connection with with the logistical office, with the kitchen, with different officers and their, groups of soldiers, so that I could make sure that I was bringing people what they needed. Because like you said, there's a reason the sleep is not there. In a wartime scenario, soldiers are not going to be sleeping. So they need to be able to function.
And what are your thoughts on psyche, on mentality, on psychology of a soldier drafting?
I had a lot of push factors, but I knew going into it that I had to be really sound mentally before, taking the lead. Because like you said, a lot of people are running away from something. A lot of people are coming here, to escape or to try to challenge themselves. But the kind of person who wants to challenge themselves by joining the Army usually has something else there. And I speak as one of them, right? And I think, a lot of people don't realize that when they make that decision. And like you said, and I'll tell you, anybody can pass the psych evaluation in the Army. Okay? It's not detailed. And the difference between lone soldiers and Israelis is that with Israelis, their entire health record is available to the Army. Lone soldiers,
It's not the same. All you need is for one doctor to give you a generalized checkup, take a few boxes, you present that paper to the Army, and you're good to go, which essentially means you can lie about anything, and people do. That's a problem, especially when it comes to mental health. Physical health, absolutely, but particularly with mental health. Because, like you said, the Army is not set up to help you with your mental health. Are they making more of an effort now than they did 10, 20 years ago? Yes, absolutely. One thing to keep in mind is the mental health officer assigned to soldiers in the Army is not a psychologist. They're a social worker, and there's a big difference. That's something people don't know. What's called a kaban or kabani, the social worker, essentially the mental health officer that you have to push like heck to see in the Army, people wait oftentimes 2 to 3 months to see this person, is not even a psychologist. They're a social worker, okay? And in order to see a psychiatrist or see a psychologist, you wait even longer. So you have people who've presented with the most extreme signs of not being there 100% mentally or not being healthy mentally, and then they wait 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to see somebody to talk to them. It's terrible. It's terrible. So you really, really want to make sure that when you're coming in to do this, you're coming in the healthiest mindset, and that you have a support system in place, whether that's your friends, whether that's family back home, you have people to talk to, you have people you can count on. And even then, it doesn't mean it's perfect, In your case, your disordered eating behavior started during the Army. I was a combat sports athlete, and then I became a model. And while I was modeling, I was doing runway, I was doing beauty, I was doing fashion. That's when I developed an eating disorder. I ended up suffering with 2 eating disorders. I started my recovery process in 2017, and that's when I got really into weightlifting. But one thing people don't like to talk about is the fact that recovery is a lifelong process, especially with eating disorders. Eating disorders, again, I'm not licensed to talk about this or provide advice or provide counseling. I'm just somebody who experienced it, and I can give my personal experience, but I'm not a professional. I'm not, disclaimer, right? In the future, would I like to be? Absolutely, but that is not my position. I can just talk about from my own personal experience and my own research. Eating disorders present usually due to a culmination of other things that are going on behind the scenes, usually some sort of anxiety, some sort of depression, and some sort of obsessive compulsive behavior, okay? There's that whole idea of control, being able to control food. Oftentimes that can journey into also controlling workouts, controlling training, that same obsessive energy. And when eating disorders are treated, especially binge eating disorder, it's different than eating a whole bag of chips. Eating a whole bag of chips is not having a binge. Binge eating disorder is characterized by long, extensive periods of time. We're talking an hour, 2 hours, where a huge amount of food is consumed, and very abnormal amounts of food is consumed, which is then accompanied, sorry, I've got some flies that are visiting me, accompanied by extreme feelings of guilt. I remember when I was dealing with binge eating disorder, I describe it as wanting to literally claw my face off and peel myself out of my body and just leave my body because I was so disgusted with myself. I was an athlete, I was a working model. Who the heck was I to lose control in such an extreme manner? I would sit on the floor and I would cry for hours. Some people who struggle with binging also deal with purging behaviors, where they then try to remove those calories either through vomiting or through extreme exercise. I did not, but I tried to make myself, and I just couldn't, right? And I look back on that period of my life, and yes, I've been in recovery for years, but I missed out on so much, and I really lost a piece of myself to eating disorder in that period of time. And for me, every day is a choice now. They treat eating disorders, especially binge eating disorders, like addiction treatment. But the one thing with drug addiction or alcohol addiction or cigarettes is that you stop. You don't stop eating, right? It's an addiction that you have to face every day, multiple times a day, and it's unique in that. And what we see, especially with athletes, is that they're kind of the perfect candidate for an eating disorder. If you were to build a candidate for an eating disorder, that classic type A person, somebody who's really motivated, especially intrinsically motivated, somebody who tries to control as many factors as they can in order to succeed, somebody who's powered by, you know, a want or a drive for success or achievement, people who are fiercely independent. These are factors that are really consistent with people who further on develop eating disorders. And if you're looking at the athletic world, there are so many pursuits where weight, especially body weight, affects performance. Gymnastics, track and field, swimming, figure skating, wrestling is a huge one, where an emphasis is put on how much you weigh. Sometimes it's encouraged by coaches, and it's very close to my heart because something I struggled with, you know, for such a long period of time. And thankfully, yes, I've been in recovery for several years, but every day is a choice. And I mean, let's talk about right now in the pandemic. There's been a huge increase in eating disorders. I read a statistic the other day that said 90% of women struggle with disordered eating behaviors. That's not the same as an eating disorder, but again, with problematic thoughts surrounding food. And then I don't know if you saw it in your own unit, but I definitely see it in mine. I see, you know, what I can identify as problematic behaviors around food on a daily basis. Not everybody can identify it that way, but I, you know, having lived through it, can identify it in a second. And it makes me unbelievably sad because I know what it can develop into, and I see what a lack of, you know, support and what a lack of education exists here, especially in the Army, for people struggling with that kind of thing.
Wow. I have to take all this all in. So we're alike in a lot more ways than both, you know, than one. Regarding I want to like reflect on some of your thoughts regarding the social worker versus psychologist. I actually never knew that. I did see a kaban several times in the Army. Once again, I'm not ashamed to say this. Hi Fly, what's up? Little cameo.
Yeah.
Once again, I was in an elite unit. You know, the tunnel and explosive warfare unit. For the guys and girls listening, there's nothing wrong with going to see a kaban. There's nothing wrong with going to see a psychologist. We're human first, soldier second. I always say to my clients, I'm human first, coach second. Human first, person second, coach third. We're humans with emotions, and it's nice that we're addressing our physical needs all day, and we're speaking about eating well and sleeping well, but you also have to be in a healthy emotional state. Woo! Quick correction, my eating disorder started when I was 15 years old, actually.
Okay.
Not in the Army. Surprise, surprise, when I started training. As you said, athletes. Totally agree with that in a million ways. When someone's going to push somebody to an extreme and gets, I must work out, I must look good, I must this, there's also going to be the dark side of that. Now, once again, for all those listening and you're wondering how in the world did this discussion go from being a combat fitness instructor in the Army, which both of us were, to eating disorders, is because for both of us, our dark demons channeled into an eating disorder. There's other forms of compulsive behavior out there. It could be porn addiction. It could be cigarette smoking compulsively. It could be alcoholism on the weekends. We all have friends who drink way too much on the weekends that are complete denial. It could be excessive marijuana smoking. It could be excessive marijuana smoking. There's so many, compulsive behaviors we have that may not be food. We're just addressing food, but this is something to be wary of. If you go home every Thursday and you can't survive your weekend without getting trashed Thursday, without getting trashed Friday, without getting trashed Saturday night, you have a problem. I'm not a therapist. I'm not there to say you're an addict, but that's something that you need to be wary of, besides the fact that the alcohol is completely hindering your ability to recover for the next week of intense training. But jumping back on the eating disorder train. So I have my theories as to why if eating disorder, I've seen disordered eating so many times in the Army, and it's pretty simple. You're not allowed to smoke in the Army, like drugs, cigarettes, unfortunately you're allowed to. In my unit, they kicked out people in the Maslul who did, because why would we let someone damage their health if we want them to protect their country at an elite level? Just a quick note about cigarettes. But alcohol is not allowed. Drugs are not allowed. Most, extreme things like drug are just, completely taboo in the Army, even on weekends. Many units do drug testing. But food's always available. Always. As Yaira said awesomely, food addiction or compulsive eating or binge eating or anorexia or bulimia, which are all different forms of disordered eating, it's always available for you. And you can't say, okay, I'm 10 years free from cocaine, but I'm 10 years free from food? So like in OA, Overeaters Anonymous, which is the 12 steps method of dealing with eating disorders, they abstain from sugar and white flour. Now, I don't agree with that approach, because I don't think abstinence in the food world. I don't think abstinence in the food world is a healthy.
Needs to damaging behavior. It's something I believe in 100%.
Yeah, you need to eat your cinnamon bun if that's your thing. You need to have your Ben and Jerry's in a healthy mindset, not in front of the computer, not on your phone, not eating from the container. But you definitely want to enjoy that Ben and Jerry's, especially if it's a cinnamon bun one, because I like cinnamon buns.
You see a common theme here, Sean. You and your cinnamon bun.
Yeah, I like cinnamon a lot. Anyways. But you can't just abstain from food. So while I do respect the fact that they choose to abstain from white flour and sugar because it gives them something that they have control of, I don't think it's an appropriate method. But with all that being said, food is always available. And as we said before, around half an hour ago, your breakfast, lunch, and dinner in the Army are an emotional window of peace where your commander's not yelling at you, you're not crawling on thorns and mud, you're not shooting, you're not under an intense regimen, you're eating. So it's like for a healthy Israeli who grew up in a healthy environment, and he has his family to go home on weekends, and he has his fridge stocked when he comes home, and he has friends and girlfriends and boyfriends and doggies and supportive people to be there. And his brother was in Matkala, and his sister was in Oketz. They have this supportive environment where they hopefully have this healthy relationship with food, and for them, lunch, breakfast, and dinner time are not an emotional window. They're just food. For us Americans, with all our demons and all our baggage, we're coming to this window.
I'm being American now, huh?
Okay. We're very close-minded. We are from New York, or there's nowhere else, or Israel, right? There's nowhere else in the rest of the world. Point is that we come with our baggage, and this baggage can either reawaken disordered eating, which can go extreme, or it can just awaken this unhealthy relationship with food because this window of relaxation is based around food. I, as a coach, I work online with a lot of soldiers in the Army who are struggling to lose weight. Now, once again, retracking. I know it sounds silly that you're struggling to lose weight in the Army, but if you're not in an elite unit and you're not moving, 50 gajillion steps a day, most of the time you're standing guard. You're on guard duty. If you have any sort of emotional or mental health issues, all the demons come up in guard duty. Comes the savior. Here's your plate of oily rice and pasta and potatoes for lunch. Oh, let me gobble this down and stuff myself with food because that's the only beacon of light in a 12-hour shift in the middle of the desert. So it makes sense, at least to me, that eating disorders are common, and it happened to you, it happened to me, and you're not as physically active as you are in the second, third year service in regular units because you're just sitting there guarding all day. It's sitting, sleeping, with very little time to work out, and that leads to even more mental health issues because working out helps combat the demons that come up. So with that being said, let's just delve into some last tips from yaira. I'm in the Army. I'm doing my 12-hour shifts. I'm not motivated to work out. I'm barely getting sleep. What can I do to still work out, to still feel good? How can I structure it in a way that will benefit me without breaking me down too much?
So you have to know your body, you have to know your routine. For example, if you know that you're not gonna get a full 6-7 hours of sleep and that you're gonna be doing something during the day, okay, you have to stand guard. You're there for 4 hours. There's stuff you can do. Your vest is heavy, your gun is heavy. All together, if you're doing squats like in place or push-ups or pull-ups, wherever you are, you're still moving, you're still getting your body going during that 4-hour period. 4 hours is a huge length of time, right? If you know that you do have a full night's sleep, but that your day is really busy, maybe it's time to turn yourself into a morning person. This is what I say when I'm working with non-combat soldiers who complain to me that after a day's worth of work, they're exhausted mentally, they don't have time. I'm like, okay, well, you're sleeping, unlike the combat soldiers, so you get yourself up an hour earlier, 3 times a week, put the time in. There's a huge difference between, motivation and discipline in my mind. A lot of people ask me, how are you always so motivated? How? I'm like, I'm not. I'm really not. It comes and goes. But discipline stays there. But you do have to train yourself with discipline. Discipline isn't something you're born with. It's a skill. You have to work on it. You have to develop it. And even then, there's still times where for a week or 2 weeks at a time, I might not do anything because life gets in the way. This is going on, that's going on. But you always come back to it. That discipline brings you back. Immediately, you're motivated. But when that motivation goes away, it's a discipline that'll stay. So try to build yourself a routine. I know that's hard in the Army because things are always changing, but usually you'll have a few constants. Even if that means that, for the last 10 minutes before bed, this is something you can do. It's 10 minutes, and it's a killer one. 5 minutes, quick spike, quick heart rate pumping, 10 minutes. 10 minutes before bed, or 10 minutes in the morning, every minute on the minute, 10 burpees, 10 times. It's always possible to do something, you know? Excuses are just that, excuses, whether that's something that you're telling yourself or you're telling somebody else, still an excuse. You know, there's always something you can do, but you have to know your body, you have to know your schedule, and you have to know how to work around those things.
Wow, I think we're going to end the episode with that tip, because I think it's just such a good tip. And I think it ties into just having some sort of structure, some sort of habitual thing that you do every day. The Army is not there to support you in that element. So if you have your 10, 15 minutes of movement, of exercise every night, even if it's not your hour and a half ideal strength and conditioning session with all your fancy equipment, if you have that something every night or every morning to look forward to that's movement and exercise based, it will help combat those demons that come up. So it's super important. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. And,
my pleasure.
And my message out there, and I'd like to hear a message as well, is that Yaira was just on FIDF, and she's a celebrity practically in Israel now. I'm also, like, not to toot my own horn, but I'm saying I work with, like, elite athletes. I work with a national team. We're both human beings. Our Instagram aside, we're both on Instagram talking to camera and speaking to camera and being there. We're human beings who suffered from mental health issues. So if you're out there, he, she, it, they, who cares, and you're suffering, please reach out. We're not therapists, but we can help you, send you to the right people. We're mini celebrities, but we suffer just like you. So you know what I mean? I'm saying we're out there on Instagram, we're speaking to camera, our life is all daisy and rosy, but we still have our demons. So do you have any message?
Remember, Instagram is a highlight reel. Very important.
Say it again. Instagram what?
Instagram is a highlight reel.
Yeah, I hear that.
We only post the best photos, the best clips, the best moments. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
With your perfect light blue theme on your whole page, of course. Hey, I noticed. Yeah, exactly. So do you have any just last message of hope, of advice for those drafting, for those in the Army out there?
I think support system is key. Find your people. Find your tribe. You know, whether you're supporting somebody else or somebody's supporting you, especially as a lone soldier, you know, find your tribe and stick with them. Find your support system. That's the most important thing. Because they're not going to find you. You have to put the work in to find them as well.
Wow. Okay.